Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. I'm glad to be back here. It's just that I had an article to write, which I still haven't really finished, but working on that, but doesn't mean that the episode should suffer too much. So, back to the news. First of all, according to Ukraine, in the Kharkov direction, Russian troops continued to try to advance towards the village of Liptsy. The Ukrainian armed forces repelled 4 out of 6 attacks. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian troops tried 17 times to attack the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. In particular, the areas of Sinkovka, Berestovo, Nevsky, Matveyevka, Stelmakhovka, and Sergeyevka. The situation is more or less peaceful at this point there, under control. In the Liman direction, Ukrainian forces repulsed 5 attacks by Russian troops in the Nevsky and Torsky areas. In the northern direction, the Ukrainian armed forces are repelling 2 attacks. So the situation is under control, and another assault is over. Of course, there are military clashes, which continue in the Kramatorsk direction, and although the Russian government is stating in their briefings that, they have taken Kramatorsk, that's a blatant lie. Nothing has been taken. This is confirmed by the bunch of Z propaganda channels and everyone else. Yeah, they're just going to be carrying on with the fact that who's beating up who. In the Pokrovsk region, active hostilities continue in the Novo-Alexandrovka area. And finally, in the Kurokhovsky direction, Russian troops launch attacks in the areas of Krasnogorovka, Novomikhailovka, Parasokievka, and Konstantinovka. Another thing is that the Ukrainian army has confirmed that they have been using drone Sea-Baby, armed with missiles, to finally launch attacks on ground targets, which is going to be interesting since, this hasn't happened before, and again, we just see how, warfare is happening. The big major thing happened on May 21st, when the Russian Defense Ministry published a draft decree that would unilaterally change these maritime borders with Lithuania and Finland in the Baltic Sea. The document appeared on the Russian government's online legal portal, although it has been since deleted. The draft decree description it's a draft of the description, notes that current points marking the width of Russia's territorial waters were established in 1985 and argues that they needed to be changed because, quote, they do not fully correspond to the modern geographical situation and were determined using small-scale marine navigation maps, among, other reasons. The agency proposes extending Russia's maritime border further into the eastern part of the Gulf of Finland and around towns of Baltiysk and Zelenogradsk. According to the document, this would allow the corresponding water area to be used as internal waters for the Russian Federation. State maritime navigation charts of the appropriate scales will be revised and reissued for the purpose of ensuring navigational safety, the draft continues. Lithuania's foreign ministry called the proposal a deliberate, targeted escalatory provocation to intimidate neighboring countries and their societies, in a statement to Politico, saying further that this is, quote, further proof that Russia's aggressive and revisionist policy is a threat to the security of neighboring countries and Europe as a whole. The agency said it planned to summon a Russian official for a full explanation. Finnish Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen pointed out that maritime border alterations are regulated by the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, to which Russia is a party. It's worth noting that creating confusion is also an element of hybrid influence. Finland is not surprised by this development, Valtonen said. She later added that Finland does not see the proposal as a provocation. Meanwhile, Finnish President Alexander Stubb said that the country's authorities were aware of Russian media reports about the proposed maritime border change. Quote, the government is closely monitoring the situation. Russia has not contacted Finland about this issue. We will proceed as always, judiciously and relying on facts. End quote. On Wednesday afternoon, multiple Russian state media outlets published reports saying the country is not planning to move its border in the Baltic, citing a military diplomatic source. The source reportedly said that, quote, there were not and are not any intentions to alter the width of Russia's territorial waters, its economic zone, the continental shelf along the mainland coast, or the state border line of the Russian Federation in the Baltic. By Wednesday afternoon, the document had disappeared from the Russian government's website, though an archived copy of its official description is still accessible. Jiri Lavikainen, a researcher at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, told the Finnish news agency Yle that, quote, under normal circumstances, Russia would not engage in the unilateral revision of territorial borders and let us learn about it from their defense ministry's website. even if it is a minor issue, Russia is trying to create problems. It is trying to make Western countries feel that the current political situation is unacceptable and they should therefore enter negotiations with Russia on terms that are favorable to it. But that's sadly not even the weirdest news about this whole mess situation. British Defense Minister Grant Shapps accused China of providing Russia with lethal weapons that could be used in the war against Ukraine. Both Reuters and Independent reported on this one. Quote, "Today I can announce that we have evidence of cooperation between Russia and China in the area of weapons used in Ukraine." This was said during a defense conference in London. According to him, new data from American and British intelligence confirms that, quote, "lethal assistance is already coming or will come from China to Russia and from there to Ukraine." End quote. The minister did not provide any other details about the supplies or intelligence data. During his speech, he also noted the rapprochement between Russia and China, saying that trade between the countries had grown by 64%, which he said shows that we are talking about a much closer relationship between Moscow and Beijing. The minister also recalled Vladimir Putin's recent trip to China, which he made shortly after his inauguration. According to quite a lot of Western media, during the war in Ukraine, China became Russia's main supplier of goods necessary for the production of various weapons, including missiles. For example, the Financial Times wrote that in 2023, 90% of microchips imported by Russia came from China and were used in the production of missiles, tanks, and aircraft. Also, in the last quarter of the year, 70% of the machine tools believed to be used in the production of ballistic missiles were imported from China. Former United States Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland told journalists about defense industrial cooperation between Russia and China. According to her, Beijing, which promised not to transfer weapons directly to Moscow, is simply sending everything necessary for their production. Meanwhile, the Chinese authorities say that they do not provide weapons to any of the parties to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, but, well, quite obviously that they would say that. And when talking about weapons, well, United States Department of Defense spokesman Patrick Ryder said Russia launched an anti-satellite vehicle into orbit on May 16th. This was announced again during a briefing on May 21st. Ryder, when asked to comment on a recent statement by the United States envoy to the UN, stated the following, quote, "Russia launched a satellite in low Earth orbit. Our assessment is that it is likely an anti-space weapon, presumably capable of attacking other satellites in low Earth orbit." According to Pentagon spokesman, Russia launched the device into the same orbit where an American government satellite is located. Ryder noted that according to United States estimates, the new Russian device is similar in technical characteristics to weapons deployed in 2019 and 2022. United States Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations Robert Wood on May 20th accused Russia of launching a satellite to low Earth orbit, which according to Washington is again capable of attacking other satellites. Wood made this statement at a meeting of United Nations Security Council, which rejected a draft resolution prepared by Russia to prevent the deployment of any weapons in space. By the way, Roscosmos had reported on the morning of May 17th, when it was May 16th in the US, that a Soyuz 2.1B launch vehicle with spacecraft on board was launched from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome in the interests of the Russian Ministry of Defense. It was not really specified which ones. Dmitry Peskov, commenting on Pentagon's statement, by the way, said that Russia acts in accordance with international law and does not violate anything, as, usual. According to him, Moscow advocated banning weapons in space, but these initiatives were rejected, including by the United States. According to American intelligence, Russia is planning to deploy nuclear weapons in space. CNN reported in February that intelligence reports indicate Russia is developing nuclear space weapons that, when detonated, will create a powerful electromagnetic pulse that could disable satellites. U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby argued that the Russian Federation is developing anti-satellite weapons, but they are still at the development stage and do not pose a direct threat. According to the New York Times, the United States asked China and India to dissuade Russia from deploying nuclear weapons in space, but the Kremlin called publications about Russia's plans to place weapons in space a trick of the White House. And of course, in April, Russia blocked another resolution in the United Nations Security Council on the non-placement of nuclear weapons in space. But here we are at the midpoint, and I wanted to say something very special to you. I'm back, and another thing that I've been working on is that we finally finally have t-shirts. It's going to grow bigger. It's going to be other merch as well. It's going to be crazy. But we have a t-shirt stuff going on. The link is in the description. If you're not seeing the description on your podcast app, please go to theeasternborder.lv, and there's a link there. It's Fourth Wall. That's the thing. Fourth Wall. You can just Google Fourth Wall, the Eastern Border, and you'll find the shop. But I have the link on our homepage in a post as well. But yeah, that thing works kind of like Patreon does. You can also like add membership tiers. There they are per month, which is something different than on Patreon. But you can switch over there as well if you want to. And you can buy our t-shirts and caps and mugs incoming as well, and all sorts of things, which are then shipped from the United States or the EU, or I think in Asia it's Japan. But basically they ship from places closest to you. Everything's made on demand, and well, I've been told the prices are kind of okay-ish. So people have been asking for this for a long time, and I will find a way how to incorporate maps there as well. I have to figure some stuff out with these things. But yeah, we have t-shirts now, and we have an opportunity for people who maybe don't like Patreon to support our show in another way through this Fourth Wall. There's yourself as the Eastern Border, small line, shop.fourthwall.com. That's the Eastern Border, line, like a minus sign, shop.fourthwall.com. But again, I'll publish the link, and it's on our homepage, theeasternborder.lv. You can get it. You can just become a member there, or you can buy t-shirts or mugs, and we'll just add stuff in as time goes on. I intend to, get Evica to do some stuff there, and of course, our buddies from Discord server, which you should also join. But I'm just really happy about it. And of course, Patreon is still working, and you can just go to theeasternborder.lv and click the donate button there if you want to support the show. But in general, I know that some of you really wanted the t-shirts. I wanted to be able to give you t-shirts and everything. So, well, that's being done. Meanwhile, in other news, the fact that there's still many conflicts going on, that's the thing. Estonia, Czech Republic, Netherlands, and Sweden are calling on the EU to cancel the visa-free regime with Georgia if they pass a law on foreign agents. That law, known as the Russian law there, because this reflects how Russia has their foreign agent law, would sort of bring Georgia closer to Russia in a way, and there have been massive protests over there. These countries have called on EU authorities to impose sanctions against Georgia if this law will be adopted. According to the Financial Times, the restrictive measures that these countries insist on include the suspension of the visa-free regime between Georgia and the EU, as well as a freeze on the allocation of funds from European funds and targeted sanctions. Restrictive measures, a source told the publication, are planned to be discussed at the meeting of the foreign ministers of the European Council, which will be held at the end of May. And this law, which the Georgian parliament adopted on May 14th, caused protests within the country and criticism abroad. Those dissatisfied with the law in particular, of course, just as myself, pointed out that it's a blatant copy of the Russian law that exists currently. The Georgian law on foreign agents provides for the creation of a special register, which will indicate all non-profit legal entities and media outlets financed from abroad by more than 20%. They will be required to publish an annual financial report. The president of Georgia, by this point, has vetoed the law on foreign agents, but Parliament has the opportunity to override it. Georgia, mind you, unilaterally abolished short-stay visas for EU citizens in 2006, and since April 2017, the EU has abolished visas for Georgian citizens. At the same time, besides these ongoing conflicts, Russia has been very active in other parts of the world. In the past 3 months, Russia has begun actively transferring military personnel and mercenaries to Libya. These forces are primarily concentrated in eastern Libya, a region under the control of Khalifa Haftar, the commander of Libyan National Army and a Kremlin ally. The western part of the country, including the capital Tripoli, is governed by the United Nations recognized government of national accord. A source within a Libyan security agency reported that at least 1,800 Russian military personnel have arrived in the country in the last 2 weeks, and some were dispatched to Niger, while others remain in Libya waiting further orders. One serviceman told journalists that he and several hundred other special forces soldiers were redeployed from Ukraine at the beginning of the year. Several thousand more fighters, both professionals and mercenaries from Wagner Group's Africa operations, arrived in Libya between February and April. In conversations with the journalists, the soldiers themselves acknowledged that their presence in Libya is unofficial. They said that they're there as a part of a private military company, though they did not specify which one. Russian military personnel and equipment have been spotted in at least 10 locations in eastern Libya since the beginning of March. Russian troops are stationed around major military bases such as Al-Hufra Air Base and Khardarbiya Air Base, as well as near smaller ones by Vadan and Marj. Sources say that some of the newly arrived Russian military personnel are involved in training local soldiers and new recruits from private military companies. Others are carrying out combat missions, such as securing the transport of military equipment. There's never been such a fuss. Tectonic shifts are happening here. One Russian soldier in Libya commented, "I think a big mess is brewing." Location data from Telegram users show an increase in activity around military sites in Libya. On March 5th, a Russian soldier with the username Andrei showed near up the Khadarbiya airbase near Sirte. A few months before, Andrei, in air quotes, was in Mulino, a city in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region where soldiers are being trained for combat in Ukraine. Nearly 2 weeks after Andrei appeared in Khadarbiya airbase, the Libyan National Army conducted military exercises there. Soon after, another group of Russian soldiers was spotted in Marj, Libya. On March 17th, photos of them were posted on Libyan social media. Verstka and its investigative partners were able to geolocate these photos by comparing the buildings and structures in them with satellite images. In early May, geolocation data confirmed the presence of 2 Russian soldiers in the Hufra. One of them was the same Andrei who'd been in the Khadarbiya airbase in March. He stayed there until at least April, then moved to Hufra by May. We have many more movements around these parts, so something big might just be happening. Meanwhile, we have some interesting news about both Belousov and, how Russia is treating its generals, which is the biggest part of this whole situation. Well, we have intelligence from a lot of investigative journalists pointing out about Belousov's sort of daily regime and what he's doing. Apparently, people have put him into this position where he's now responsible mostly for just basically turning this Russian Ministry of Defense into more like other countries' ministries of defense, where they do the bureaucracy and the general staff office is the one conducting warfare. Now, the big problem here is that you really can't do it in the middle of the war. And this Belousov guy, he has multiple lovers, and he's apparently very much an ultra-religious, very orthodox person. That doesn't stop him from being a completely, corrupt nepotist who, although, believes in all the system and everything, but there's, like, Russian commentators from the opposition side have noted that nothing really stops him from running around, doing horrible things, just as, cheating on his wife and everything, while he has a lot of these icons, these Orthodox icons stashed all over his house and his workplace. Because he believes he has some sort of potential, everyday guides of what he's doing at all times, including how he should follow hygiene when it comes to sexuality, i.e., he shouldn't probably be sleeping around that much. He wrote that in his personal sort of list of things that should be done. That's kind of funny, really, if you think about it, because his daily routine is weird. He's one of those people who claim to be ultra-religious, but who really doesn't follow through with that. But there is also something for the good news of all of us here who support the Ukrainian side in this conflict. Former commander of the 58th Army of the Russian Armed Forces, Major General Ivan Popov, was arrested on suspicion of fraud. The military telegram channel Two Majors reported. The TASS agency also writes about Popov's arrest with reference to law enforcement agencies. According to TASS, the investigation's request to arrest Popov was considered in the 235th Garrison Military Court. The agency's source did not provide any other details. The Telegram channel, Two Mayors, claims that the Major General was arrested on May 17th in the case of fraud committed by an organized group or on a large scale, Part 4 of the Article 159 of the Criminal Code of Russian Federation. The case is being handled by the Department of Military Counterintelligence of the FSB. Initially, the investigation was conducted against deputy of Popov's. 2 more defendants are involved in this case. a businessman from Krasnodar and an officer in the Southern Military District. According to the investigation, which is cited by the channels, Popov sold about 2,000 tons of metal products intended for the construction of fortifications in the Zaporizhia direction, where the Major General led the defense during his service. Now, in July 2023, the commander, Ivan Popov, said that he was removed from his post after he reported to the command about the problems of the Russian army and criticized the decisions of the leadership of the Russian Ministry of Defense. Popov's appeal, which was probably initially intended only for colleagues, was published in his Telegram channel by State Duma deputy Andrei Gurulyov, who in the past also commanded the 58th Army. Politicians and propagandists in all the Z channels, they were going insane. They were outraged, especially the propagandists were, about the publication of Popov's statement in particular. The Senator Andrei Turchak said that a quote-unquote political show was made from the general's address. Now, what he said back then, I can read you down in full, because that alone shows all this stuff, and currently all the Z channels are going quite crazy about this, because with the arrest of this guy, this is kind of like Girkin getting arrested again, because this was one of the competent generals out there, but it's just a bit crazy what's happening. But this whole speech, yeah, that was just something. But now it's being played out all over the place. And to be honest, I don't really remember what I did in the July 2023. Maybe I read this. I definitely know I mentioned this, but all in all, it's a nice little case to post about what he's saying on the whole matter. Good night, my beloved gladiators, loved ones, and all of our family. I had to gather my thoughts. A lot of events had happened in the last 2 days. Now I can say this with confidence. I was taken into custody and removed from my position. Lieutenant General Lyamin arrived and took command of the army. I'm waiting for my future military fate and for everything to change and for me to receive some other kind of offer for further service. I was honest with you from the very beginning. I was frank with you. I closed all the distances with all the gladiators of the army, from the soldier to the marshal. In our case, up to the chief of staff, Major General Medvedev. Because we die in the same way. We fight in the same way. Everyone is scared the same way. The pain and hardship is the same for everyone. I have made absolutely no difference between you, and I was always as honest as possible from the first day of my arrival in our army. And therefore, I'm telling you honestly, a difficult situation has arisen with senior management when it was necessary either to remain silent and cowardly, to say what they wanted to hear, or call a spade a spade. In the name of you, in the name of all of our military friends who have died, I had no right to lie, so I outlined all the problematic issues that exist today in the army regarding combat work and support. Called all things by their proper names. I focused attention on the most important tragedy of the modern war: the counter-battery combat, the lack of artillery, the reconnaissance stations, and the mass death and injury of our brothers from enemy artillery. I also raised a number of other problems and expressed this at the highest level, frankly, extremely harshly. In this regard, apparently the senior commanders sensed some kind of danger in me, and quickly, in one day of light, concocted an order from the Ministry of Defense, removed me from the location, and got rid of me. As many regimental commanders of the division said today, our army could not be penetrated from the front by the military personnel of the Ukrainian armed forces. We were hit from the rear by our senior commanders, treacherously and vilely decapitating the army at the most difficult and tense moment. But I stay in touch constantly with all soldiers and sergeants, warrant officers of the army, with everyone absolutely, 24/7. Any problems, domestic, family, rear, combat, and absolutely any problems whatsoever. We continue to work as a group. I'm available to you at all times. It's an honor for me to stand in the same ranks with you. I'm proud, I value it, and I will do everything in my power and even more to make it easier for you to fight and for as many of our comrades as possible to survive. I continue to carry out my combat mission. The main thing is in the name of those who will never return from the battlefield, in the name of the memory, in the name of the shed blood of soldiers and officers in Zaporizhia, we are obliged to defeat the enemy, to repel his offensive, to create conditions for subsequent actions, and thereby honor the memory of our fallen comrades. Always with you, always in touch, your Spartak. Yeah, there was a cult of Spartak in the Soviet army, and I guess this continues on to this day. However, you have to kind of remember the fact that for all the, for all the things the Spartak did, he was beaten at the end now, wasn't it? This was just interesting and weird, because Yeah, this guy, just like Girkin, was out there actually telling the truth and trying to be as competent as humanly possible. And this really hasn't helped him out, because in the Russian army, well, if you are basically working hard and doing your job, then you will not be loved at all. And meanwhile, just to add there, some news from that touch me here related to the Israeli conflict. International Criminal Court has now called for Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's Ministry of Defense to also be arrested, same with the Putin warrant. They also called for Hamas to be arrested, Hamas leaders to be arrested who planned the October 7th attacks, and it's getting serious. It's getting serious and, well, difficult out there. I really hope that war settles itself quickly. At this point, by the way, we also know that as of today, Norway, Ireland, and Spain have now recognized Palestinian independence. Israel have announced the recall of ambassadors from these countries. Norway has recognized the Palestinian state, which Norwegian Prime Minister, whom I will not even try to pronounce, honestly, said on this morning, on May 22nd, and the decision will come into force on May 28th. He explained that, quote, when we recognize Palestine, we will be able to more forcefully call on other countries to support the construction of a Palestinian state, and we will be able to hold the Palestinian state accountable. The Irish authorities made the same decision, which was reported by the Irish Times. This was announced by Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris. According to him, Spanish authorities are preparing a similar decision, which was then confirmed by Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. The Israeli Foreign Ministry, commenting on May 21st on Ireland's plans to recognize Palestinian statehood, called on the country, quote, not to be pawn in the hands of Hamas. Recognition of Palestinian state will lead to increased terrorism, instability in the region, and jeopardize any prospect of peace, the ministry said. The state of Palestine, by the way, currently is officially recognized by 138 of the 193 United Nations member countries, including Russia and China. Palestinian statehood is not recognized by countries such as United States of America, Great Britain, France, Germany, and Israel. Sweden, in 2014, became the first EU member to unilaterally recognize Palestinian independence. And several other European countries made this decision before joining EU. It's all like a massive mess, and I don't know how that will turn out because there are interests everywhere. I'm also doing some research into the whole mess that's happening in Sudan, which is by no means easy, but still, ongoing conflicts in this modern day, they make everything difficult. At the same time, Israeli authorities turned off the Associated Press camera, which is broadcasting from the Gaza Strip, and took away the equipment from journalists. The Communications Ministry have now returned the confiscated equipment to the Associated Press, pending a safety report and a re-examination of the issue, agency head Shlomo Karhi said. According to him, the Ministry of Defense demanded that the issue be reconsidered. This was another situation that just happened recently. Associated Press had condemned the Israeli government's actions, quote, in the strongest possible terms, end quote, which is something that, again, everyone says, but that doesn't really mean that much these days. And that they also said that Israeli authorities were abusing the law. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid called the government's decision, quote, an act of madness. This is not Al Jazeera. This is an American media outlet that has won 53 Pulitzer Prizes, he wrote. Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi told him that by law, devices used to deliver content to Al Jazeera could be confiscated from any individual or corporation. In addition, he said Associated Press employees were warned in advance about the violation of the law last week. And as a journalist, obviously, I am very angry when, actual journalism work gets interrupted. Still, we're working on everything going on, and of course, our work is not leading anywhere. Oh yeah, and of course, please, let me remind you that still, we have those t-shirts. Please go on the link. I'm pretty sure some of you would like this. But for now, that's it. До свидания, товарищи. And as always, remember, happiness is mandatory.